Hi everyone! I am here today to talk to you guys about probiotics. But before we can really start talking about actual probiotic supplements and probiotic foods, we have to kind of have a good understanding of the GI tract and what probiotics are supposed to even be doing. So if you think about it, your GI tract is your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine, and your large intestine. The esophagus and the stomach don't have a lot of bacteria in them because there's a lot of acidity in the stomach that would basically kill them. The small intestine has a little, but not a ton. Most of the bacteria in your intestinal tract are going to be in the large intestine, also known as the colon, which is the last section of your intestines before the end, when you poop things out. And so basically, the bacteria that live in your large intestine have a job. When food travels through you, a lot of it gets digested and absorbed in the small intestine. But there's certain particles called non-digestible carbohydrates that make it to the large intestine, and the bacteria's job is to digest them there. And so we're mainly talking about fiber, inulin, which is also in plants, and then in human breast milk, there's oligosaccharides, which a lot of them make it to the large intestine. And what the bacteria do with these carbohydrates is they essentially eat them. And then the byproduct is gas and short-chain fatty acids. The short-chain fatty acids are what feeds the cells that line your entire intestinal tract. They're super important for gut health. And then the gas feeds the bacteria, and some of it comes out as gas. And so that's sort of the process in the large intestine. Now, you have to understand there are more bacteria in and on our body than there are human cells. Approximately 10 times more bacteria is the current estimate. And a lot of them are in the gut. Some of them are in the mouth, on your skin, in the urogenital canals, and things like that. But most of them are in the gut. Many of them are in the gut. And there's anywhere from 500 to 1,000 different strains, different species of bacteria living in your gut. Here's where science is kind of lost. We don't know which ones are the right ones. So the scientists are working on it, but at the moment, we've definitely been able to figure out some correlations between certain bacterial populations and different health measures, but we don't know what's the perfect gut bacteria mix. But we do know that these bacteria seem to play a role in colon health, general GI wellness, so things like constipation and diarrhea, the lymphatic system, and by extension, the immune system, that's huge, bone health, neurological conditions, so things like anxiety, some of the things like autism, ADHD, there's some connections there, which is fascinating. And we know that the bacteria in your gut are impacted by a lot of different things. So how you were birthed, whether you came through the vaginal canal or born by cesarean, whether you've been on antibiotics at any point recently or ever, proximity to animals. So people who live on farms or have even dogs tend to have slightly different bacteria than people without. Your proximity to soil and nature. And then of course, diet. One of those things being fiber. So remember, fiber is the food for the bacteria. So depending on how much fiber is in your diet is going to change which bacteria like living in your colon. And then also probiotic foods. So this is kind of a fascinating topic and one that we don't have a ton of information on yet. But basically the question is, does eating bacteria change the bacteria that's in our gut? And there's really two ways that we can do that, right? There's fermented foods, and then there's actual probiotic supplements. So fermented foods are foods that contain carbohydrates naturally and are exposed to bacteria. And then those bacteria, much like the ones in our gut do with our non-digestible carbohydrates, these bacteria eat the sugars in the foods, and then they produce gas, they produce acid, and this is why fermented products are often bubbly, kind of carbonated, sour, and that's from the bacteria eating the sugars that were naturally occurring in things like milk or juice or vegetables. So it's just an interesting thing. And then when you eat that food, there are still living bacteria in the product. Now, the bacteria can come from just leaving the food at room temperature. So a lot of people will make homemade sauerkraut just by leaving cabbage on their counter, basically. And then the bacteria in the air is what ferments the cabbage. You can also make things like yogurt using a yogurt starter where you're putting bacteria into the milk intentionally. Either way, the result is a fermented food that has live bacteria in it. Keep in mind, if a fermented food is heated after fermentation, so sourdough bread or shelf-stable sauerkrauts and pickles, the bacteria will be killed. So those foods, while they are still fermented foods, they are no longer living. They don't have any live bacteria present in them. And then in the case of alcohol, which is also fermented, most manufacturers of alcohol they'll filter out the bacteria at the end because it changes the taste. And so that is, again, a fermented food that's not actually a live bacterial food. Then aside from food, there's also the option of taking a probiotic supplement, which is an encapsulated or powdered bacteria that's been isolated for the purpose of changing your health. And it's a really vague promise that they're making, and there's a reason for that. The thing about probiotics, like we said, we don't know what the right bacteria in your gut is. So we don't know what to put in the probiotics. And if you look, there's at least 20 different strains, many more really, that are in the various probiotics on the shelf today. And they're all different. And some people have great results with one and some people have great results with another. It's really hard to say what probiotic will help you. And so, there is some research on certain bacteria that help with certain things. So certainly if you have a very clear malady, like maybe constipation or like an ADHD type of a neurological situation, there is some research out there saying this strain has been shown to help that. The other thing you have to think about is, are any of these probiotics, whether from food or from pills or supplements, actually making it to the gut alive? A lot of the times they're dying in the stomach because of all the stomach acid. Now, a dead bacteria can still have an impact on your health, potentially a positive impact. So it's not completely moot. But what a dead bacteria definitely can't do is recolonize your gut. So you may hear people talk about trying to change the population that lives in your gut day in and day out. And a dead probiotic that got killed in your stomach isn't going to be able to do that. And even a live one might not be able to do that, depending on how fierce the bacteria that are currently in your gut are and how much they defend against newcomers. So the research is very much still out. What does this all mean? What do I recommend for you? First of all, eat fermented foods, because you know what? They have been in the diet for so long. They're part of human history. I have a hard time believing that they're not nutritious. Things like apple cider vinegar with the mother, you can see that's the yeast and the bacteria down at the bottom there. Kombucha, again, you can see at the bottom there's some yeast and bacteria down there. Yogurt, of course, is great, and you guys know I love plain whole milk yogurt, not flavored. Sauerkraut, make sure you're buying it from the refrigerated section. If it's on the shelf in a can, it has been pasteurized and is no longer a living product. And then, in Asian cooking, there's all sorts of things like some of these chili pastes and miso. Those are also fermented. There's a lot of cool, flavorful fermented foods. No reason not to incorporate these foods into your diet. They're nutritious and they may give you benefits. As far as pills, so the thing about probiotics, I'm not necessarily just recommending this brand, but when it comes to probiotic pills, my recommendation is buy a 30-day supply, take it religiously for 30 days. If whatever you were trying to solve is not solved, don't buy that one again, try a different one. Because the bottom line is, different people have different problems with their bacteria. And so different people need different probiotics to help them. So it's really hard for me to make a blanket supplement recommendation when it comes to probiotics. I'm not against them, but I just think it's trial and error, and don't waste your money on more than a 30-day supply at once. So hopefully that helps you guys figure out what to do when you're in the ever-growing probiotic aisle at the grocery store or some of these cool fermented foods that you can find. Have a good one.